Before I close my eyes, I always hear the distant laughter of the masks. And I know I'm not alone, even if no one else can see me. Before starting the report, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Write in the comments what time this video arrived for you. Now, enjoy your favorite horror session. Every time I hear the music from that carousel, I taste blood in my mouth and smell smoke on my skin. My name is Lucas. I'm 38 years old, a civil engineer. I've never been the type to scare easily. My work taught me to deal with concrete problems, structures, numbers, deadlines. No mysteries or stories you can't prove. But the truth is, ever since I arrived in that town, something inside me began to crumble. I was hired to oversee the renovation of an old building, a long-abandoned cultural center in the heart of a small town in rural Pennsylvania. A forgotten place, with cobblestone streets and that suffocating air only small, still towns seem to have. I didn't want to go, but the project seemed simple. The money was good, and I needed it, so I accepted. On my first day, while walking through the town center, I came across the main square, an open space, blanketed in dry leaves and silence, with rusted benches and twisted trees. In the middle, the remnants of an amusement park, or what was left of it. A broken carousel, its wood cracked and rotting with time, the iron horses twisted and faded. That's where it all began. It felt like my eyes were deceiving me, or like my mind was playing tricks. I was sure I had seen that place before, not just in passing, but somewhere deeper, as if I had been there in another life. The feeling pressed on my chest, a mix of nostalgia and fear I couldn't explain. For a moment, I thought I was going to throw up. There was no one else around, just the wind stirring the dust. That same night, the nightmare came. I was back in the square, but everything was different. The carousel was on fire, spinning slowly, its music distorted and horrific. I saw a child trapped on one of the horses, its body engulfed in flames, skin peeling away in a fire colored like nothing I'd ever seen. Masked people watched in silence. White, expressionless masks that paralyzed me. I woke up drenched in sweat, my skin tingling. I looked at my arm and found a red mark, a nearly perfect circular burn. I tried to convince myself it was just a dream, that the mark came from something at work. But from then on, the déjà vu started coming more often. In every street of that town, in every face I passed, I saw echoes of the past. Small details, a sigh, an unfinished sentence, pulled me towards something I couldn't understand. At work, my colleagues started looking at me strangely. It felt like I was changing, becoming tense, distracted. That's when I heard about past life regression therapy, a therapist named Helena who claimed she could help people uncover lost memories. I was skeptical at first, but I needed answers. I wanted peace. I didn't yet know that the deeper I dug, the further down I'd go, into a place where past and present blend, where horror repeats in an endless spiral, and where the only way out is to face the truth everyone tries to hide. And that truth begins with the music from that carousel. The next day was a blur. I could barely work. The mark on my arm burned as if it had been branded into my skin. I knew I couldn't ignore what was happening. And more importantly, I couldn't ignore the growing feeling that none of it was coincidence. I went looking for Helena, the therapist. She worked at a small clinic near the square, a quiet place lined with old books and a strong scent of herbs. When I told her about the dreams, the déjà vu, and the strange burn, she didn't hesitate. "This seems far beyond your conscious mind, Lucas," she said. "Repressed memories, maybe from another life. I can help you go there, through regression hypnosis." I hesitated. My rational mind told me it was nonsense, but my heart craved answers. That afternoon, lying back in that reclining chair, with Helena's calm voice guiding me, I began to drift to a time I couldn't explain. The images came in flashes, a sunny square, laughing children, and that bright, joyful carousel spinning. But something was wrong. A strange feeling of sadness, mixed with fear, began to grow inside me. Suddenly, I saw a child, me, or someone who looked just like me, trapped on the carousel. A moment of joy frozen in the horror that followed. The fire burning everything, the smoke, the muffled screams of the masked onlookers standing silently. When I opened my eyes, I was shaking. Helena looked concerned, but said it was just a manifestation of my subconscious. But what truly disturbed me came after. I spent hours digging through records in the town's public library, searching old newspapers. Eventually, I found a headline from 1957, "Fire at Amusement Park Kills Dozens. Investigation points to safety failure." I flipped through the yellowed pages, black and white photos showing the park packed with children, and then flames consuming everything. There was a list of victims, names that felt eerily familiar, as if I knew them, as if they were part of something much larger than I understood. The report said it was the worst disaster in the town's history. Several bodies were never found, missing, lost to the fire, or taken elsewhere, as some local rumors suggested. Soon I began hearing strange stories from townspeople, people who'd had nightmares like mine and then vanished without a trace, as if the carousel's fire had taken their souls too. At night, the nightmare came back, more vivid and cruel. I saw the masks, the flames, the music louder, more like a lament. But this time, I woke with more than a burn. There were marks on my neck, like fingers pressing into my skin. Something in that town was trying to hold me, as if the memories weren't just mine, but part of a chain, a network of souls bound by the same event. I returned to Helena for more sessions. Under hypnosis, I saw fragments of other faces, other voices. I wasn't the only child stuck in the cycle. Other souls were there, repeating the same fate. And the worst part, the masked figures weren't just spectators. They were part of it, like an experiment or a curse. Helena spoke of old documents referencing rituals and secret research from the 1950s. Hidden experiments attempting to control reincarnation. Forced reincarnation, she called it, where souls were trapped in an endless cycle, reliving the same trauma until something broke the chain. I couldn't sleep that night. The pressure inside my head grew, images and sensations blending with reality. I had to know more. I had to find out who those masked people were, what they had to do with the fire, and what exactly was happening to me. But deep down, I already knew. Digging deeper might be too dangerous. Still, there was no turning back, because the circle was closing, and I was at its center. I was already blurring the line between dream and reality, but I wasn't ready for what I'd find next. In the following days, I searched everything I could about the missing people. Old residents, city records, forgotten newspapers. Each name carried a fractured story, a trail lost to time. But a pattern emerged. All had a connection to the amusement park. And not just that, they all reported similar dreams. The carousel in flames and the masked onlookers. I eventually found a woman named Clara, living alone in a house near the forest on the edge of town. She'd been close to some of the victims and claimed to have survived the trauma, though she bore deep scars. When I met her, she looked pale, eyes sunken and tired. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "They never let us go," she whispered. "The circle, that cursed circle. I saw what happens when you try to run." Clara told me she'd spent years trying to warn people, but no one believed her. The town chose to forget the fire and the disappearances, sweeping it all under the rug. She showed me old photos, masked figures in secret meetings inside a warehouse, documents about occult rituals and scientific experiments trying to control the fate of souls. It was all linked to something called Operation Eternum, allegedly funded by a shadowy organization, involving both scientists and mystics. As Clara spoke, my own nightmare came to life. The masked faces, the eternal flames, the child trapped on that endlessly spinning carousel. I returned to Helena. She guided me into deeper regression. This time, my mind led me to memories that weren't just mine. I saw the life of that child and the lives of others. People I knew now, but from another time, another existence. We were all trapped in a time loop. The same souls, the same events, playing out again and again. But what terrified me most was realizing that the masked figures were us, versions of ourselves, the victims and the perpetrators, all part of a system feeding on fear and pain. Each time the cycle repeated, the souls tried to escape but failed, bound by an invisible force. I felt like I was going mad. I no longer knew who the real enemy was, the fire, the mass, or myself. Then one night, a voice came to me in a dream, clear, calm, calling me by name. Lucas, only by facing the truth can you break the circle. I woke up with my heart pounding, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sliver of chance to escape that fate. But to do that, I would have to go beyond memories, beyond masks and fire. I would have to face the darkness inside myself, and perhaps accept that the price of freedom was higher than I had imagined. When the voice called me, a chill ran down my spine. I knew the decisive moment was near. Something inside me stirred, like all the pain and fear were about to erupt. That day, I returned to the remains of the amusement park. Morning fog still cloaked the silent streets as I reached the carousel, now buried in dry leaves and a silence that screamed. The place pressed against my chest. Every part of it felt burned into my soul. As I drew closer, the air grew heavier. I could hear, or maybe imagine, the carousel's twisted music playing faintly in the back of my mind. I closed my eyes and was pulled back into the past. This time, there was no fear, only clarity. I was that child trapped on the burning carousel, but I was also one of the masked. I had been part of the circle, not only as a victim, but as a cog in the machine that kept it turning. For decades, my soul had been divided between fear and guilt, between the urge to flee and the need to repeat the cycle. I opened my eyes and saw familiar faces appear in the mist, versions of myself from other lives, masked, silent. They surrounded me, and I felt the weight of every moment I'd lived, every choice I hadn't made. Helena once said the only way to break the cycle was to relive the trauma, not as a victim, but with understanding. So in that square, I screamed into the wind, defying the darkness that imprisoned me. The carousel began to turn. Flames rose again. I felt fire touch my skin. But it didn't hurt. It purified. The masks fell away, revealing faces I knew, my own reflected in countless variations. And then, in the midst of that storm of memory and fire, I understood. The cycle wasn't a curse, but a lesson, a call to accept, forgive, and free ourselves. When the flames died, I stood alone in the square. The mark on my arm was gone. A deep silence filled the air. I walked away, changed, knowing the unbreakable circle might not be eternal. But as I left that town behind, the carousel's music echoed faintly in the distance, and a chill ran down my spine. Because deep inside, I knew that freedom had a price, and the cycle could begin again, in another life, in another time. Are you enjoying the video? Leave your comment. Your support is very important to the channel. Now let's move on to the next report. I've never been to Prague, but I knew every street, every sound, every shadow as if I'd lived there for centuries. My name is Daniel. I'm 41 years old and I spend more time with dead objects than with living people. I'm an art restorer, specialized in old wood, churches, frames, furniture, religious icons, things that carry time in their fibers, in their smell, in the dust that won't come off. I've always liked silence, history, getting lost in details. I guess it's because I never knew how to handle the present. At the beginning of the year, I received a strange offer, an email without a clear signature, without much explanation. We have a recently discovered Baroque mirror in an old castle on the outskirts of Boston. It urgently needs restoration. Your reputation reached us. Travel, lodging, and payment in advance. If you accept, depart within 72 hours. I should have refused. The timing was terrible. My mother was sick. My marriage was already falling apart, and I was in the middle of a big project in Charleston. But something about that message moved me. It was as if I had been waiting for it. I left on the third day. The cold hit me hard at Logan Airport. Dry, sharp. I arrived in the city still thawing from winter, with sidewalks covered in old snow and a leaden sky. A driver was waiting for me with a sign where my name was misspelled, Danilo Soares. I didn't complain. I just got in the car. During the ride to the village where the castle stood, I tried to start a conversation. The man was mute, literally. He showed me a badge with the symbol of a foundation I'd never heard of and a label that read MARIC, American Sign Language Interpreter, ASL in English. But there was no one there to communicate with me by signs, not even me. That's when the feeling that nothing made sense began. The castle was isolated, surrounded by a twisted, silent forest. It was called Blackgate, the Black Gate. Only part of the structure was still standing. The rest was ruins and moss. The wing where I would stay had minimal heating, smelled like wet wood, and the silence was so dense it felt heavy. I met only 2 people in the first days. Teresa, a Czech restorer in charge of documents in smaller frames. Young, reserved, intense eyes, and a discreet scar on her neck. And the mirror. Yes, capital M, because it was more than just an object. It was huge, almost 2 meters tall, with a frame carved from black oak, corroded by time and something I couldn't name. On the sides, faces carved in expressions of pain, but not the typical dramatic Baroque caricatures. This was different. It had realism. It had life, or death. The surface of the mirror was so opaque, it barely reflected light. There were tiny cracks on the lower edge, like someone had tried to break it and given up. They say it was sealed with blood and silver, Teresa said one night, bringing me tea. Sealed? What do you mean? The local story says the mirror holds what eyes cannot see, but no one really knows what that means. Or, no one wants to say. I laughed, but inside I couldn't ignore the chill. I started work on the 3rd day. My initial focus was the frame. The structure was threatening to collapse, and I needed to remove some wood to treat the fungi. I wore gloves, as always, but at the second touch, I felt something strange. The texture of the wood was warm, pulsating. I thought it was my imagination. But that night, I dreamed. I dreamed I was walking the streets of an old Boston, much darker and colder than the present. I wore heavy clothes, a long cloak, and boots that hit the cobblestones like hammers. The city was empty, but I knew exactly where to go. My feet moved on their own, guided by a memory I didn't recognize as mine. I stopped before an iron door. A woman waited for me. She wore a black veil and held something in her arms. Something that looked like the mirror, but smaller. When I approached, she whispered something in a language I never learned. And yet, I understood perfectly. You promised you wouldn't come back. I woke up sweating, with her voice still echoing in my ears. When I looked at my hands, I saw a dark stain on my left palm. Rust-colored, like dried blood. I ran to the bathroom, washed it, scrubbed it. It disappeared. I tried to forget, kept working, but the dreams returned the next night and the next, always on the same street, always with the veiled woman, and each time I got closer, saw more, felt more. On the 4th night, I recognized a street sign in the dream, Alchemist's Lane. The next day, I asked Teresa if that place existed. She stopped walking, looked at me intently. It does. It's an old alley, but there's no reason for you to know that, unless... She didn't finish the sentence. The next night, I did something I shouldn't have. I stayed alone in the mirror room at midnight, turned off all the lights, leaving only my flashlight on. I sat before it and waited. The wood seemed to breathe. Gradually, the glass's opacity began to clear, as if it were cleaning itself from the inside. And then, for the first time since I arrived, I saw a sharp reflection. But it wasn't mine, it was his. A man with my face, but thinner, paler, with eyes that didn't blink. He was in a round room full of books and bottles, strange symbols on the walls, and he held a quill with fresh blood on the tip. "Wake up," he whispered. "You promised to remember." And the glass cracked. He had my face, but none of my soul. I stood frozen for a few seconds, staring at the crack on the lower edge of the glass. The sound still reverberated in the room, like a distant bell, even after everything fell silent again. One crack only, and yet it felt like something inside me had broken too. I left the room stumbling. The flashlight trembled in my hand. I walked through the castle's dark corridors, hearing my own steps echo as if someone followed me. When I got to the bedroom, I locked the door and pushed a chair against it. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I noticed something curious. The crack in the mirror had disappeared. The wood around it was flawless, as if the previous night had never happened. I touched the glass, cold, inert, silent. Teresa found me there and frowned, seeing my state. You have deep, dark circles, nightmares, dreams, too real. Dreaming of the mirror isn't a good sign, Daniel. Have you dreamed? Silence. Not directly, but I met someone who did. An Austrian restorer hired years ago, worked only 3 days, then disappeared. Left behind his suitcase, documents, everything. That chilled me to the bone. And you didn't think you should tell me before? If I told you everything, you would have run away, and we need to understand what the mirror wants. Maybe on it with you, it's different. I started investigating, on my own. In the few spare hours, I sifted through files in the makeshift office set up in the castle. Teresa kept folders, diaries, photo records, and maps. I found mention of a name, Gregor Ehrlich, the missing Austrian restorer. There were photos of him, blonde hair, angular face, eyes of someone who already knew too much. There was also a handwritten, poorly preserved note, apparently torn from a diary. The wood of the mirror is alive, not literally, but symbolically. It absorbs memories, pain, desires, maybe souls. I kept reading until a passage stopped me. Sometimes I feel it knows I'm not who I'm supposed to be here, that I'm only occupying a place that belonged to another, or to myself in another life. It's like being an intruder in your own skin. I saw myself in that passage, literally. It wasn't just déjà vu. It was as if the world around me was unraveling, layer by layer, revealing an old reality that insisted on returning. That night I dreamed again, but now it was no longer a dream. It was a memory. I walked the narrow alleys of old Boston. My name was Elias. I heard people calling me. I wore a dark hooded tunic and carried a leather pouch with strange objects. Bottles, black candles, dry leaves, broken coins. I entered a damp basement, lit only by chandeliers, and sat before a book open in Latin. But the scariest thing was the mirror. Small, still incomplete, held in a rough frame, but with the same shape, the same gaze. Someone was there with me, the veiled woman. You're already too close, Elias, but you still can't cross the gate. Then tell me where it is. You carry it, always have, but you'll only see it if you're willing to get lost. I woke with a scream stuck in my throat. The room was dark and the door unlocked. I was sure I'd locked it. The chair was fallen on the floor, and on the bed there was a torn page from an old book, which hadn't been there before, written in red ink, in Latin, and in my handwriting. Memonis doloris est vivere. Remembering pain is to keep living. I took the page to Teresa, demanding explanations. She went pale. Where did you get this? It was in my room. This is part of Elias Volker's grimoire, an alchemist condemned for heresy in 1621. They say he tried to create a mirror capable of holding a soul. Volker, Elias? Yes, Elias was his real name. He changed it to avoid persecution. And this mirror, is it the same? That's what we believe. It disappeared for centuries and was found only 2 months ago, buried in an iron-sealed basement. From that day on, the borders between my lives began to collapse. I started writing words I didn't know how to translate, recognized symbols on old city gates, led paths through the forest as if I had been there before. Sometimes, without realizing it, I called Teresa by another name, Annika, until she finally confronted me. Daniel, do you remember me? You left me trapped in 1621, in the ritual. You were the one who condemned me along with the mirror. That's crazy. It's not. I died in that basement, burning with it. And now, you're back, but the mirror never forgot. That night I decided to face the truth. I returned to the mirror room, sat before it, but this time without light. Only darkness, silence, and the sound of my own heartbeat. And when the glass cleared, I saw myself again. But it was no longer just an image. It was a portal. On the other side, Elias reached out his hand, and behind him, I saw dozens of reflections. Versions of me in different centuries, all trying to escape, all trapped. The mirror is a cycle, he said, and there's only one way to break it. How? I asked, feeling my hand pass through the glass. You already know. You just don't want to remember what you did. And then something pulled me inside. When my hand passed through the mirror, I didn't feel the cold of the glass. I felt the warmth of blood. There was no sensation of falling, no sound. It was like diving into a dark lake, not knowing where the body begins or ends. Everything around me was absence of time, space, logic. For a moment, I thought I had died, but then I opened my eyes. I was standing. The ground beneath my feet was uneven stone, slightly damp. A circular hall rose around me, its brick walls covered with moss and symbols carved deeply. Lights danced above, but there were no flames, just a strange glow seeming to come from the ceiling, like a trapped aurora. And there, right in front of me, he was, Elias, me, or what I had been. We shared the same face, but the gaze was much older, weary, like someone who had lived too long without the mercy of death. Welcome to remembrance, he said in a firm voice. You didn't cross a portal, you crossed yourself. The hall was the same as in my dreams. Curved shelves, jars with living liquids, scattered parchments. But now everything had texture, weight, smell, dampness. I was really there. Why did you bring me here? Because it's time to remember and to choose. Elias walked to a stone table and pulled a cloth of deep purple away from an object. My stomach twisted. It was the mirror, but in its original state. Much smaller, with the frame still raw wood, and the glass polished like a freshly formed lake. No cracks, no wrinkles in the reflection. It was pure, not yet corrupted. This is the beginning, Elias whispered. The beginning of what? The prison, I approached. In the reflection, I didn't see only my face. I saw others, many versions of me. Child, young, old, sick, desperate, screaming, and behind each one, the same woman, Annika. You were an obsessed alchemist, Elias said. Not for gold, not for glory, but for control. You wanted to conquer death, to hold everything, memories, love, pain, even your own soul. You created this mirror as a vessel, but something went wrong. What? You tied other lives to yours, and now none can escape. The hall trembled slightly, as if an ancient force pulsed beneath the stones. I began to hear whispers, thousands of voices overlapping, whispering secrets in languages I never learned, but understood anyway. You sealed her soul inside the mirror, he continued. Annika's? She was the necessary sacrifice, and she trusted you. The pain hit me like a blow. Images flooded uncontrolled. Me, Elias, and Annika walking hand in hand through a forest, laughing under a gray sky. A quick kiss, a promise, a ritual, a scream. She died because of me. She died and was reborn, with you, in every life, always by your side, always forgotten, until now. I stepped away from the mirror. Then why make me remember? Because the cycle is closing. You have a chance, a single choice. Either break the mirror and free them all, or stay here, and the cycle begins again. I tried to run. I ran through the damp corridors of the hall, now in ruins, as if centuries had passed in seconds. The walls were cracked, marked by claw marks. Faces carved into the stones screamed silently. Voices behind me repeated a name, Elias, Elias, Elias. I reached an iron door. It was locked. Behind me, footsteps. Elias watching me with eyes full of pity. You've fled responsibility for centuries. Are you ready to face it now? I don't know. You do. You always knew. The mirror only reflects what you hide. Then the wall beside me opened with a snap, as if it breathed, and behind it, I saw something that froze me. Teresa, kneeling, hands bound by rusty chains. It wasn't an illusion. It was her. Here. Annika? Daniel, please. Ilias raised a curved dagger. The blade trembled with its own light. "The cycle has always demanded a sacrifice," he said. "But now, you choose." "No, I can't do this again." "You can, or you can break the mirror. But if you do, all you were, all you remember, everything will be erased, including her, including you." I stood still. Before me, two paths. Break the mirror and end the cycle, but lose every memory, every connection, even with Annika. Or accept the sacrifice again, perpetuate the ritual, and keep alive the curse of eternal remembrance. The room darkened. The mirror began to vibrate, releasing a golden light that spread like a crack in the world. And then, I heard my own voice, from another life, another time. Memory is poison when you cannot change the past. I woke lying on the modern hall floor, back in the present, but the mirror was in pieces. Next to me, Teresa, alive, confused, eyes full of tears. "You did this?" "I don't know, but I think so." And for the first time since I arrived, I felt silence as peace, not as threat. But as we stood up, I noticed one thing. The mirror was broken, but the frame was intact. And from the depths of the castle, coming from the oldest wing, I heard a muffled laugh. The mirror broke, but the image kept looking back. Silence. The hall where the mirror had stood for centuries now seemed to breathe relief. The shards of glass were scattered like pulled teeth, still pulsing with a faint light that faded slowly. The frame, however, remained intact, untouched, as if older than time itself. Teresa rose slowly, rubbing her wrists, the chains now broken on the floor like dead worms. "You broke the mirror," she whispered. "I think I did. Do you remember everything?" "Yes, Elias. The ritual. You. Annika." She looked at me with something between gratitude and fear. "If you remember, then the cycle is not over." It was then we heard it. The sound. A muffled, dragged laugh, as if coming from underground. Then footsteps. Slow, heavy, rhythmic. Feet dragging on stone. There was no doubt. Something was still alive down there. We went down together. The oldest wing of the castle lay beneath the foundation, hidden by a trapdoor sealed with boards so old they crumbled at touch. We used flashlights. None of us spoke. We knew there was more there, something the mirror hid, something it projected to keep us away from the truth. The underground corridor was narrow, claustrophobic, made of uneven stones and covered in slime. The light flickered. The air was too warm for a place without heating, and the smell was damp earth mixed with iron. At the end of the corridor, a half-open iron door, and behind it, a second mirror, smaller, circular, with an even older frame, made of bones. It wasn't just carved wood, but human phalanges, real vertebrae, connected by a dark metal I didn't recognize. The glass surface reflected nothing. It was black, opaque, like a blind eye. Teresa stopped at the entrance. That was never on the inventory. Maybe it was never discovered, or never allowed to be. I stepped closer. The flashlight beam didn't penetrate the surface. It was as if the mirror absorbed the light. My reflection did not exist there. No sound was made. Even my heartbeat sounded weaker. And then I heard it. "You thought you were the first, but you were just the next." The voice came from inside the mirror. It wasn't Elias, not any of my past lives. It was something else. Something behind all of us, an original echo. The mirror was not the origin. It was the window to something far older. The lights failed. For a second, everything went dark. And in that second, I saw everything. I saw Elias in the 17th century, but also a version of me in ancient Rome, burning scrolls. I saw another me in a Mongolian cave, carving symbols into walls. I saw a modern version, dressed in white and locked in a padded room, repeating the same names: Annika, Marek, Elias, Daniel. We were all echoes, successive reflections of a soul that tried to conquer time and failed. The mirror doesn't just hold your soul, it multiplies. You copied yourself, and each copy wants to live, wants to escape. I fell to my knees. My bones ached as if centuries old. My blood pulsed with a memory too large for me to contain. It was like carrying generations inside my chest. "If you destroy this mirror, the copies vanish," the voice said, "but the pain remains. And if I don't destroy it, the cycle restarts. You die and wake up in another time, with another name, with the same curse." I trembled. Teresa, or Annika, or whoever she really was, held my hand tightly. "You have to choose again," she said, "but for the first time, you're aware." I picked up a granite stone from the floor. The mirror began to vibrate, as if anticipating. I felt thousands of eyes watching me from the other side. Versions of me, some crying, others screaming, one smiling. Elias, watching silently. "The pain doesn't go away, Daniel," he said, "but you can stop it from continuing." I closed my eyes and threw. The impact made everything tremble. A silent scream tore through the air. The frame cracked. The glass exploded into 1,000 black shards. And for a moment I heard every version of me disappear. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. The ceiling was white. The window showed a gray sky. Teresa sat beside me reading a book. "You woke up," she said. "Where?" "Boston. 3 days in a coma. They found you fallen in the castle ruins." My head hurt, but not like before. It was emptiness, a blank space. "Do you remember everything?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not everything. Fragments. But I remember you." I closed my eyes, for the first time, with nothing behind my eyelids. In the following days, we walked the city, ate, laughed, cried. None of us could say exactly who we were, but we knew what we'd left behind: the mirror, the prison, and everything it held. On the last night before going home, we passed an antique shop in the historic district, and in the window, among ordinary objects, I saw a piece of dark frame, curved, carved with faces in agony, but no mirror, just wood, like an empty shell. I smiled and kept walking. Some memories are like broken mirrors. You can look, but never return to what was whole. Some stories never have clear answers, and that's perhaps what scares us the most. To hear more stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and get ready for the next story.